Randy, we have a lot of folks watching online. What do you think this town needs to hear loudly and clearly that it doesn't get about public education?
This town needs to spend 5 minutes in public schools. Even 5 minutes. Because this town actually thinks about things in the debate and in the conflict, as opposed to the way, frankly, de Tocqueville thought about America and Jefferson thought about America, which is that public schools were the way you brought community together. It was the way you forged a common identity, and also, thankfully, over the last 100 years, particularly in the aftermath of Brown versus Board of Education, the way you create diversity. It's really kind of the only place that people who don't know each other and don't know each other's tribes actually see each other, other than later on in college or in employment. Those are the only 3 places. And so, yes, it has to be the opportunity agent, it has to be the great equalizer. When half of America's kids come in with trauma, and it has to be a way that we create a welcoming and safe environment. My point is that everything we want to do about America's future runs through a public school, and we're in a stupid, silly debate about whether, not how we strengthen them. And when Washington's having this stupid, silly debate about whether, and DeVos is trying to undermine and defund and all this other stuff, 90% of parents still send their kids to public schools. That was true 50 years ago, and it's true now. So the issue is, how do we strengthen it so we actually have this as the public square, so we actually have this as the common village? How do we strengthen public schools? Not how do we keep this stupid, inane debate about weather.
Right. You and I have talked a lot before about teachers being blamed for outcomes within the community. And you got this insight about wraparound services, about building in other elements of a community to sort of change the game. And we've both been equally obsessed with McDowell County, West Virginia. Can you give us a snapshot of the challenge of McDowell County, West Virginia, why McDowell County, West Virginia is so important, and where you think the future is of that, of thinking about this title we have here of a more perfect union?
Right. So look, I have gone through, I now think about my life as I started working when the dinosaurs roamed. So I am now kind of in the fourth decade of my work in this arena. And I could kind of give like legions of examples of where things work and where things need to be strengthened. And everybody can do the same thing. We got how many millions of kids and how many schools, so you can have a data point for everything. The piece about McDowell, which is so interesting, particularly when in this country 43% of kids are poor, McDowell County is in Appalachia. It was basically not focused on by the so-called reformers who wanted to basically fixate on testing and top-down accountability and competition, because it was too poor and it was too rural and nobody was going to make any money off of it, and it was really, really hard to get to. So West Virginia actually put in a state control of the school system, and that didn't work. And Gail Manchin, who was the then wife of the governor, said, could you help?
Now senator.
Now senator. But think about that. The Jewish, gay, union leader from New York, could you help in McDowell County, West Virginia? And so it took us a while to figure out whether we could. We decided yes. Fast forward 8 years, the county has control of its schools. We raised graduation rates 20 points. We doubled the number of kids going to college. We've reduced opioid addiction. We've done the kind of things that we actually preach about all over. Best practices, student engagement, project-based learning, mentoring programs, wraparound services, and now we are building the first multiple-story building in McDowell County in 50 years. That's if any charter school had done what I just ticked off, they would be in the front pages everywhere. So the point is, this is huge poverty. We know if you can array the resources, and we didn't take over the school system. We started as a public-private partnership. The point is this: 43% of America is poor. So much of America has been abandoned by market forces and other things. It's not just McDowell, it's Scranton, it's Lordstown, it's other places. People want to stay in these communities. What are we going to do to revitalize, and what are we going to do to use the common space of schools as a way of, as a key to that revitalization, including wrapping services around? We're doing the same thing in Peoria, Illinois. And you know, different circumstances, but I could go through and tick through the kind of success.
Morningside Heights in New York.
Morningside Heights in New York. There's been a new RAND study that just came out that the wraparound services in New York City have really helped. If you think about who our kids are, that's why the first question you asked, what should Washington know? Spend a little bit of time with real people. Stop with the sound bites. Stop with trying to kill each other. Stop with the lies. Stop with who's bigger than who, and actually spend time with real people and try to solve real people's issues. And that's what we try to do in schools every single day.
In just a moment, I'm going to invite two folks to broaden the conversation, talk about it. But I want to ask
Sorry,
you.
I didn't mean to scream.
People, you are a well-known, you're a well-known Dem. I mean, you play across both sides, but you're a well-known Democrat. Who's been your best partner on the Republican side? Can you out that person and just briefly?
Oh my God,
share
if
with
I
us?
out
Yeah.
that person, they'll never be able, they're going to have to
Really?
retire.
But there he is retiring.
Wait, he is retiring.
I know who it
Lamar
is.
Alexander.
Yeah. So why has Lamar been such a good partner? And what, again, in the spirit of today, what can be done to replicate those kinds of partnerships across the aisle?
And I would actually say, you know, think about even my saying, I'm fearful for them that they have to, that they be outed this way, that this kind of civitas is, you know, is not something that's looked up to, that this kind of civitas is something that somebody has to try to whisper about. Look, Lamar, two things about Senator Alexander. Number one, he's been around for long enough that he and Al Shanker had a really good relationship, and that created some credit for me.
Al Shanker was the very
Al
famous
Shanker was
long-term
one of my
president of America, yeah.
predecessors, you know, 3 predecessors ago,
Right.
but also my predecessor in New York. And it was a different time when, even though you had fierce debates, and Al would have fierce debates with President Reagan and others about competition versus the common good, and there are certain things that have to be about the common good and certain things in our private capitalist economy that are about competition. And if you're about the whole, what Al would argue is if you're about all kids, then you have to be about the public good, not about competition. If you're about a market economy, you can understand about competition. But even though I would say Lamar Alexander, Senator Alexander had a different view about some of this stuff, the two of them believed so much about the purpose and the value of public education, that was a place to start. And what I see with several Republicans that I have worked with over the course of time, including in New York, the most important partner I had in New York was Senator Joe Bruno, Republican or Democrat alike, because he was focused on how do you solve problems. And so with Senator Alexander, he comes from a different perspective, but it's how do you solve problems.
Terrific. Well, let me invite to the stage Amy Cole-Smith, Associate Director of the Center for Public University Transformation at the Association of Public Land-Grant Universities. And if you don't know about the land-grant universities, there are lots of them. They're powerful. They're cool. And also Sarita Brown, President of Excelencia in Education. Sarita, oh, hey, hi. You caught me. I was like, where is she? Where is she? Uh-oh. Good to see you both. Thank you. Thank you both for joining us.
And I went to a land-grant institution.
Oh, you did? Wow. Great.
I went to the ILR school at Cornell.
So let me start with Sarita, and very conversational. I'm going to make this the view on education and kind of getting it right, moving the needle in the right direction. I think, I mentioned McDowell County because I want people to know about it. There are a lot of communities like you mentioned McDowell County because it's a placeholder for a lot of others. But the question is about respect or demeaning people, and that's part of the inclusion thing. Is you want to basically respect a lot broader. So how are you achieving that in Excelencia? What needle are you trying to move? What problem are you fixing?
Well, our purpose is accelerating Latino student success in higher education, and we do it against the backdrop of a country's most precious resource is its human resource. That's why we've been tracking demography as a country. That's why the census matters.
Right.
That's why all the things that we do that look at who makes up America, who we are as a society. The opportunity that resonates with some of what you were just talking about is that there are a lot of solutions, and there are a lot of wonderful academic leaders, university, college presidents and chancellors who every day are taking the students who make it through public school systems and want to get degrees of all kinds, from associates all the way through graduate degrees, and want to contribute. And so I was delighted at this framing because it is about those people who are about solutions.
So where is the vector going right now?
The vector is that it matters what we do as a society, what we show in terms of what we respect. There is right now in the portfolio of Excelencia in education over 100 presidents and chancellors who are publicly saying that they are working to make their campuses learning environments where Latino students thrive and all students thrive. They are saying it publicly, they manifest it in their curriculum, they manifest it in terms of what they do for students, and they are saying, we personify the best of the academy. And the best of the academy is not necessarily Research One institutions, my beloved UT Austin being one. They are institutions that take in the talent of America, serve them well, propel them into a society. And so this whole dynamic of the idea of serving, we have to show respect for that. We, as a community, as a society, we have to show respect for the things that we value. And winning arguments in crude ways, which has become very in vogue these days, is not healthy. I'm the mother of a 17-year-old. I spend a lot of time talking to her about, mijita, you don't do that. That may happen on television, but in this family, we don't do that. And I can't believe that I'm alone.
No.
And this is the moment. That's why I was delighted to get this invitation. I was thrilled that you have a convergence of people across all sectors that are trying to do this. Because we are living through, this is I'm not quite where you are, mija, but I'm almost. And it's been a long time, and I've never seen this before. And so it absolutely matters. And institutions of higher education, I have found, are the places where we still, when something ugly happens, we recognize that this is not what we do.
But there's one, and I'm curious as to what you think about this. 41 states still spend less on public education than they did 10 years ago. And in meeting after meeting that I've had, because we are the largest public education union, we represent more, not just contingent workers, but professors and whatever than anyone else. People are starving. The food insecurity of kids, the adjunct, you basically have a system where you are teaching kids based upon contingent workers all throughout the country. And I'm wondering if, again, this is this kind of starvation of our future. We see it in terms of healthcare, we see it in terms of poverty, we see it in terms of higher education, we see it in terms of K-12. I'm curious as to whether you're seeing it.
Well, that's why
I'm seeing it every day.
Right.
Well, for me, that's why the juxtaposition of what's going on in terms of incarceration and what's going on in terms of education is so poignant. I mean, what we spend in most states for the penal system exceeds what is going on in terms of public education.
Amy, I want to bring you into this conversation, but I want you to answer a question for me.
Okay.
So I have a fun job. I get to meet anybody I want. And I meet a lot of university presidents, and I've been to land-grant university chancellors, presidents. I've been, with people like Eduardo Padron down at Miami-Dade College, different sector. And I would tell you honestly that 25% of these leaders I would find swimming along with your transformational commitment, understand what it is. And the rest are just driven by inertia, wanting to do tomorrow, basically what they did today. And I find the educational establishment thinking it's beyond being disrupted and not understanding the So I want you to tell me, like Rachel Maddow would say, talk me down or tell me different. Because I think that educational transformation and kind of dealing with any number of these issues is a vital part of the equation. But I think you must have a really damn hard job from the people I've met.
I would say it is definitely a difficult job because at the end of the day, you're trying to change mindsets of people. The establishment of higher education, it was definitely built off of white supremacy. So when you are trying to dismantle that, but generationally, it's just been, you know, the majority who have been given this opportunity to get higher education. When you are trying to change the mindset, you are going to get a lot of pushback because traditionally that's how it's always been. So when we work with these leaders, the first thing that we're saying is, what is your mission statement saying? What is the vision statement? What is your strategic plan? And is equity and diversity actually even a part of it? And if it is, what have you done so far within your vision, strategic plan, or mission statement to actually show that you are working instead of just throwing money at a program? So for instance, if you look at some of the HBCUs, actually all of the HBCUs who have been graduating,
Historic black college
historically black college universities.
You have, what, 28 of them?
Yes, we do. Who have been graduating African American men their entire existence. They've been doing it with less. But then when you look at some of our land-grant institutions where that is actually a problem for them, a lot of them, you know, the answer is, well, let's throw money at a program and do it like that. But you have to do more than that. These students that you're bringing in from some of these low-income communities, they have to have a sense of belonging. You can't just bring them in and say, we're going to graduate you and then we're going to check you off to show that we have equity on our campus. No. What else are you doing to make them feel belonging? Do people on the campus actually look like them? So not only are we in a way trying to dismantle and disrupt what has been historically within higher education, but also looking at the faculty. You know, you have brilliant black and brown people who have these brilliant minds. Right. Bring them up and you know, let them show what they have so that they can not only be leaders, but also mentors to these black and brown students.
So the insight I've had with Randi Weingarten's
And
work.
tenured professors,
Yeah.
instead of just adjuncts who
Yeah.
every single year don't know whether they're going to have to cobble together
Right.
5 different jobs,
That's
and they
right.
don't have health insurance.
That's exactly right.
So one of the things that Randi helped me understand years ago was that education and teaching in these institutions that are getting the spotlight put on them for all of social dysfunction. I'm wondering if the same is true in the universities you work with, where if you're not looking at the structural racism and discrimination that's been part of finance and housing and the legal system and incarceration and all these other pieces. So how much of your burden is actually beyond the schools and universities and you to begin looking at the ecosystem of how, I mean, one of my former colleagues at The Atlantic, Olga Kazan, wrote I really recommend this piece that she wrote about a young, bright African-American woman in Baltimore, and how the cards were just stacked against her, and how you're in one zip code and there's a 20-year life expectancy difference between one district of Baltimore and another district of Baltimore. You know, it's really horrible. And so, again, when you kind of look at those people who get at the point where they can get a university, there's been a lot of other crap that's out there. So that makes your job even tougher.
It does. We have a portion of APLU, which is the urban serving institutions, or urban serving universities. And just with them, they're trying to reach more out into the communities and also have these institutions partner with the K through 12s because, you know, it's all about access at the end of the day.
Exactly right.
You can't just go to probably a first-gen student and say, hey, we want you to come to college, you know, because a lot of that higher ed language, a lot of people really don't understand. So when you're going to these first-gen students who are from these low-income communities, you have to have more than just your admissions package.
Right.
You have to tell them, okay, by you going to this institution, this is what's going to happen. This is not only are you going to aid your family, but also your community in general, and how you can stay here and actually uplift your community when it comes to economics as well as health.
Sarita, from your experience of creating different pathways, you know, when I look at the Hispanic community in America, the rates of assimilation, the rates of home buying, the rates of economic success are much higher than the average, you know, the public really recommends. What is happening that's right that's replicable? I mean, what do you need, you know, to sort of, I mean, we have 2 people here that are dealing with other pockets of the community. So what's going right in your world that can be shared as a
There are more solution builders. There are more presidents and chancellors who are taking responsibility not just for their campus, but for their community and where their students, their graduates then go. We have, because we've been doing this work for 15 years, we have a searchable database called Examples of Excelencia every year, which is solutions across the country. the Growing What Works database. I would imagine that we will find affinity when we
Yes.
look at not only where, but how and what they do. And part of the reason we do that is because when you catalyze this kind of conversation, and there are people who say, well, what can I do? This is where they would look. We would, and I go back to the point that I made earlier. I mean, I think that the opportunity to frame the moment where,
Right.
yes, we identify the challenge, but we don't take for granted that there are like-minded people who every day are turning it out.
And I think that's the through line, the thing that gives me hope is that even with the kind of polarization that we have in the country right now and the huge income disparities and wealth disparities, these kind of programs where people take responsibility and say, yes, we have challenges, but what are the solutions?
I mean, if I just may,
Yeah.
among the institutions that we work with,
Right.
they not only enroll but graduate 1 in 4 Latinos across this whole country.
Right.
That's 100 institutions. So if that's possible out of a universe of 4,000
Yes.
plus, if that's possible, just the energy of people who want to go towards solutions and keeping it safe and building it, we can turn the tide on this.
So I want to ask you each a 30-second question because we're constrained on time. Randy and I did this cool thing once. Remember, what was the guy's name? Checker Finn? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah, Checker Finn, former Assistant Secretary of Education. You know, a kind of gladiatorial rival to Randy's view of the world. And I had them both on stage at the same time. And so we did a session called Trading Places. And without telling them, I had them get out of their seats and switch seats, and then each argue the merits of the other's argument, to walk in the other person's shoes. It was the most impactful thing on public education and charter schools I've ever done. It taught me more. And so just in 30 seconds, I'd love to hear from you, just as an exercise to show the world how you do this. Think about your rival. Think about the people that don't agree with where you're at. What's the best concept they have that you need to reconsider? Sarita?
Since I'm not quite grasping what I'm supposed to do, Randy,
Tell me the
could you-
best side of your opponent's views. Something that has merit that you need to think about.
that quality comes in all kinds of ways, and that the energy of today's students in all its forms is necessary for us as a country to thrive.
I think that's really your view, but that's okay. That passes. Randy?
That, that not every child is getting a decent education. And that is absolutely right. Not every child is getting a decent education. And that we have a responsibility, all of us, to figure out how to do it. And they would say, this is one way, and I would say, this is another way. But they are right that we have to do a better job confronting our future.
Amy?
Well, my rival would say, we want the best students at our institutions because we are the best. We are the best, one of the best institutions. But I would clap back and say, look beyond your zip code because some of those best students that you are looking for are way out there.
Please give a round of applause to Amy Cole Smith, Randi Weingarten, and Sarita Brown. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.